Here's an idea. Super Mario Bros. Is the world's greatest piece of surrealist art.
Let's go.
It's probably a fair guess that most people who watch Idea Channel are familiar with Mario and the long-standing video game franchise starring him. And given that familiarity, Mario might not seem that weird to you. He and his games are a huge part of our culture, but let's say that you had to explain this guy and his antics to someone who had never heard of him before. He's a plumber who needs to rescue a princess from a turtle dinosaur, sometimes with the help of another dinosaur who eats living creatures to produce eggs used as weapons. Standing in your way on the princess quest are sentient mushrooms, turtles that drop other spikier turtles from clouds or who throw hammers at you, also ghosts, robed mask wearers, and caterpillars with a temper, just to name a few. You collect coins by smashing your head into bricks, and you travel around the world through pipes. Okay, actually that last one sort of makes sense. But otherwise, completely bonkers. I might as well be saying things like, we're in the desert and the clocks are melting. It's raining, but businessmen, there are elephants and they have tubas for trunks. I guess actually that one sort of makes sense too. Either way, it's easy to look at Mario, not just the character and not just a single game, but the whole 30-year franchise and all of its wildly varied elements, and then look at surrealist art and draw some parallels. In comparison to many, if not most, long-running, influential video game series, the elements that comprise any given Mario game can seem picked from a floppy red hat. And the combination of unexpected elements in surrealist artworks can seem likewise just as non sequitur. In both situations, by putting unexpected things together, one arrives, by definition, at surprising, sometimes even hilarious results. Ergo, Mario is surrealism. Let's tanuki suit out of here. But hold your tailspins for just a moment, because there's a warp pipe here. If we wanted to, we could go deeper. It may be that Mario games and surrealist painting have cosmetic similarities, but we could also ask if that relationship persists at more fundamental levels. Like, do Mario games and surrealist visual art have related historical contexts? Does each have similar results or impacts? So to start, let's talk for a melting tick about what surrealism is. So, André Breton was a leading French surrealist writer and anti-fascist, a thing that I promise is going to be important soon enough, who wrote his Manifesto of Surrealism in 1924. In it, Breton writes that people had, in effect, lost their imagination. Distracted and sated by materialism, Breton charges that lots of folks had become stuck in what he called the realistic attitude, a dull view of the world which bases reason primarily on familiarity and therefore comfort and practicality. He criticizes mankind, saying people seek reassurance rather than the excitement or salvation of expansive originality. And he said that this happens at great cost. The realistic attitude, he wrote, clearly seems to me to be hostile to any intellectual or moral advancement. I loathe it, for it is made up of mediocrity, hate, and dull conceit. Forbidden, he later writes, is any kind of search for truth which is not in conformance with accepted practices. Surrealism, he felt, could be an antidote to how boring, repetitive, and sensical everything had become, and as such, an antidote to even greater and more pressing troubles. Drawing heavily from Freud, Breton describes how in dreams, one can find something akin to the true operations of thought. In dreams, the surprising combination of elements like your dad is a lawnmower, and your house is made of cheese, and you go back in time to visit George Washington. For some reason, it all kind of makes sense. The goal of surrealism would be to seize upon this pre-rational, purposefully unreasonable cognition, and in so doing, escape the structures of moral and aesthetic comfort holding everyone back. If you could visually represent the bizarreness of thought and show its surreality, then perhaps others would realize that the rationality holding them back isn't the only game in town. The weird semi-nonsense that comprises surrealist art, then, isn't the end goal of the movement, but one effect of an overarching philosophy described by Breton. In order to progress, in order to rescue humanity, one must confront, and sometimes court, the unexpected. But okay, what, you might ask, did Breton and the Surrealists think humanity needed rescuing from? Well, many things, all very grand and important sounding, but perhaps most importantly and pressingly, fascism. In 1924, the year of Bretton's manifesto, Mussolini was elected Prime Minister of Italy, and it would be Italy's last free election for 22 years. Breton and the other Surrealists, witnessing the rise of authoritarian nationalism, saw Surrealism as one way to challenge the regime, along with other more compliant art forms and media outlets. To be clear, fascism did not inspire Surrealism or single-handedly bring it into being, but it did provide an impetus to some of its most famous practitioners, except Dali, who didn't get along with Breton and who was actually a fascist. Yeah, it's surprising, I know. Fascism also provides a fulcrum, albeit admittedly a slightly awkward one, which pivots us back to Mario. I don't know that I can say for sure what inspired Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. Not fascism, if I had to guess. He's talked of technological restrictions guiding the design of Mario's hat and mustache. With only so many pixels available, one shape was easier than another. This inspired him to think of Mario as a plumber, so hey, why not make him from New York? Bowser was originally supposed to be an ox, inspired by the Ox King from Alakazam the Great, but became more of a turtle after the design of the Koopa Troopas was finalized, and he is named after a Korean dish. So the creative decisions which give us Mario and his pals seem to be a combination of restriction, inspiration, iteration, and whim. Maybe there is a Breton-like Miyamoto Mario manifesto out there and I just haven't found it. If someone has a link, post it in the comments. But until then, we're gonna go a little bigger and talk about how the grand design of Mario and his various worlds, from Super Mario Bros. To the New Donk Odyssey, is reflective of a particular flavor of not quite surreality, specifically post-World War II Japanese culture. So, post-war Japan has a reputation for being weird, at least by Western standards. Japanese media, advertising, and television especially, can seem frenetic or chaotic, with numerous characters, mascots, slogans, and signs overlapping one another and vying for attention. A media landscape which echoes much of the Japanese urban landscape, densely packed and often dizzyingly heterogeneous. A look which Wu Yuan has pointed out contributes to the hyper-capitalist East Asian stereotypes found in genre works like Blade Runner or Vaporwave, actually. While the collected Mario universe doesn't traffic in the bleak, crowded commercialism of dank cyberpunk landscapes, it does possess a similar, albeit significantly more colorful, frenetic, character-driven, sign-dense quality. The Mario universe has a huge character roster and endless worlds, lands, enemies, and abilities, perhaps a reflection of the landscape from which Miyamoto hails. Which is to say that the philosophies that define Miyamoto et al.'s designs may not be as easily stated as Breton's surrealism, as they may not comprise some resistance to a dominant political form, but rather exist as a contiguous part of the culture they're in and from. But this doesn't mean that those philosophies don't share some traits with surrealism. In his book Otaku, Japanese Database Animals, Hiroki Azuma makes the case that Japan's frenetic, sign-dense culture results significantly from the struggles of rebuilding the country, both culturally and literally, after World War II. Specifically, the shame of defeat after an embrace of fascism as an Axis power, and the destruction of the landscape itself around Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Azuma points out that this destruction provides a disconnect from the traditional culture of Japan, which continues to loom large, sure, but after which a definitive chapter break was placed. Having to confront defeat and to rebuild means that Japan skipped modernity as experienced by other world powers in the mid-20th century. Japan went straight from traditionalism to post-modernity, and as a result, Azuma writes, would emerge as a leading nation boasting a fully matured consumer society and technological prowess, suggesting that unhindered by the past, unconcerned with the comfort of familiarity, uninterested in realistic attitudes, Japan is free as a culture to progress. And the surrealist-seeming endless recombination of surprising elements, from a cat dressed as a young girl, a sad egg, and mega-tanned street fashion to cute girls who are also powerful magic users or deadly killers, is a defining feature of Japanese commercial culture. The evolution of Mario specifically, a plumber who fights turtles through various games and often unexpected universes involving warp pipes, embiggening mushrooms, flying raccoon dog suits, angry bullets, and a cap that definitely doesn't possess things, so don't get any ideas. It all feels similarly iterative and recombinatory, similar to Japanese commercial culture as a whole, and similar to Surrealism's embrace of the unexpected. Of course, a cosmetic similarity doesn't mean Japan's post-modernity and Breton's conception of Surrealism are identical. Far from it. Less of a ward against fascism, Japan's commercial culture, as Azuma seems to suggest, is a result of it. Maybe even penance for it. However, though the inspirations may be at odds, one could argue that the results are comparable. To be Japanese, Azuma writes, is thus to be standing at the forefront of history. Breton, by comparison, writes, amid the bad taste of my time, I strive to go further than anyone else. Two sides of the same coin, perhaps? To the degree you consider a push for progress a defining feature of Surrealism, which would largely be determined by how much you side with Breton, this is another way that we could choose to view Mario as a Surrealist masterpiece, or as a masterpiece born of a Surrealist context. We may also ask if Mario games challenge our realistic attitudes, or try as Miyamoto might after 30+ years of pipe warping, fireball spitting, and sentient turnip harvesting. Has Mario become the comfort that we seek in place of expansive originality? Breton's Surrealism and Azuma's postmodern Japan may not be twin ideas, but perhaps they're cousins, or simply unexpected elements I've put in proximity with Mario in the hopes of spurring your imagination, disrupting your comfort, or challenging some regime. What do y'all think? Is Mario a masterpiece of Surrealism? Let us know in the comments. Keep it PG. In this week's comment response video, we talk about your thoughts regarding sleep. If you want to watch that one, you can find a link in the doobly-doo or wait for the end card to show up. Also, a little bit of business before we get too much further. Now is where the Idea channel is ending. Schedule starts to get a little bit weird, so I just want to be clear about what you can expect. Next week, we are not going to be releasing a scripted video. We're going to be releasing the comment responses for this week's video, for the Mario video, and also a little bit more of the Q&A stuff that we did from a couple weeks ago. So just, some questions that we thought were fun that didn't make it into the final cut of that from a couple weeks ago. After next week, we're gonna be taking 2 weeks off where you won't see us upload anything, and then 4 weeks from this week, on the week of the 14th, we're going to be uploading our next scripted episode, and that will be the first of the 3 final Idea Channel episodes. So that the week of the 14th is when we're in the home stretch. A lot of people have also been asking about when we are going to be doing the final Idea Channel goodbye party here in New York, and I still don't have it firmed up. We're trying to find the best possible place. Keep an eye on the Twitter, the Facebook, the subreddit. I will announce literally as soon as I possibly can. I promise. I want to make sure that you have enough time to, put it in your calendars, set some time aside. Yeah, we'd love to see you. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit, links in the doobly-doo. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and my podcast Reasonably Sound also on Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud. And last but certainly not least, this week's episode would not have been possible or good without the very hard work of these Koopalings.